Hello, everyone. My name is Marie Fejos. I'm the head of content at Commodities People. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Katie Carter and Jonathan Alger. They both work for ClearDox, a leading provider of commodity-specific intelligence and operational automation. Katie, you're the Vice President, Product Management, and you, Jonathan, you're the Vice President, Customer Success. Welcome to you both. Very happy to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Nice to be here.
Good. The automation in the back office has always been a challenge for companies. And I think there's been a clear evolution in that space in recent years, though, from docs to data automation, then commodities intelligence, and now agentic automation across an increasing number of back office tasks and processes. So, very keen to discuss all of these with you today. And I guess my first question would be to you both. What drew you to focus on automation in energy and commodity trading?
Sure. So I can go first. So I've spent the last 15 years of my career prior to ClearDox, being an operations manager in the physical commodities trading space. Going through that position in those roles, I saw the need for the automation. I saw when automation is deployed, the benefits for not only the individuals, but also the company. And so as my career and my journey through the commodities industry has progressed, I've brought myself more into the automation and understanding where the buy-in needs to happen, and I've seen the real world benefits from it. So I've seen it, from the perspective of the commodities trading company and seeing where those benefits take off, and that's what's really drawn me into those type of things like automation and improving optimal document efficiency and things like that.
All right. Katie?
Yeah, I would say very similar to Jonathan in my own professional experience. Early on in my career as a risk manager and trader in a physical commodity trading company, we organized our position in P&L with Excel sheets, and I was part of a team that migrated to a CTRM for that process. And so I had a front row seat to the before and the after, and it was significantly impactful. We went from, having to be in the office quite late in the evenings to make sure the position in the P&L was produced and reported, to being able to leave a little bit earlier and spend the time where we were in the office making, more interesting analysis of the data. And it was real and impactful. And I think getting to see that happen side by side really motivated me to, look at automation and energy and trading companies.
So, how has technology in energy and commodity trading evolved over the past decade from what you've seen, you both?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think there's been a couple, pretty big moves. I think moving more to a cloud infrastructure and API-enabled applications has been pretty fundamental. But also, I think looking at the technical capabilities to move from a more rule-based system to look at, business process automations to something that can be more dynamic, more towards the intelligent and adaptive automation that's enabled with AI is a really big shift that we've seen in the last year. So I think that has just enabled a better focus on risk management, compliance, data, and getting, prolific data that can be useful for drawing insights.
Yeah, and I can add to what Katie is saying as well. So throughout my career, right, a lot of the operational technology that we interacted with was not purpose fit for the operation. So a lot of times we had technology that we would try to fit our operation or our business process into. And so what we have seen as an evolution is more purpose or more focused business driven technologies that have evolved. And as we are progressing, not only with ClearDox, but with other vendors as well, is we're seeing more of a focus around the use cases, the business processes, rather than here's a technology that might work in some cases and you have to make it fit for other cases. And so that's what I think the evolution of the technology in the commodity space has really been, is kind of this evolution around the use case and developing the workflow around that use case.
Yeah, and what major shifts have you seen in how the companies approach automation today compared to, let's say, 5 years ago?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it still goes with my original answer for the other question, which is it's around the business and the use case. So we've seen companies that have gone from Excel to maybe an SAP to, another third-party system, but it's not really business or fit for that process. And so why Excel spreadsheets are so relevant in the commodities industry is because it's a blank slate that you can work through, but it's not efficient. And so the approach that we've seen is trying to find solutions that fit into that business use case or that particular workflow. And we've seen that more from our current customers, our prospects, and the market as a whole. So we've seen more of that business, workflow automation revolving around specific business use cases.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, more historically, there was a big drive to move away from Excel simply because it's not being auditable or scalable. And there was a demand to have a system where you could coexist with your coworkers in a single source of truth. And that is absolutely foundational. But moving beyond that to really focus on the business problem you need to solve and looking at technologies that focus on the sort of business and user-centric domain of the commodity space is a shift that I'm seeing.
From your perspective, what innovations are shaping the next wave of trading automation?
I'll leave that to
I
you,
mean,
Katie.
everything we see now is, yeah, I was gonna say, everything we see right now is AI driven. Really, obviously, that's a big part of our focus. And so naturally, we learn and see a lot in that space. But what large language models, generative AI, machine learning to a certain extent has enabled is, starting to realize that, technology can produce the realization of the promise now of automation and real-time decision making and scenario analysis. So I see that as being, a big part of the next wave, in terms of trading automation.
Yeah.
Right.
And to kind of go on top of what Katie is saying, and we're seeing more customers get more comfortable with that type of technology. And so as the technology has become more relevant and it's become more usable throughout the market, not only in the commodities industry, but in other markets and other industries as well, we've seen a more willingness to adopt. And I think that what we're seeing as a trend for the future is how these large language models expand, how AI agents come into play about helping, current users or people in the industry, do their jobs better, faster, more efficient. And so we're seeing a strong trend towards the AI, but again, my theme is always the AI, but with a business use case or business workflow around it. And that's what I think the ultimate future is going to be for our industry.
So agentic automation promises systems that can act with more autonomy, more adaptiveness as well. How do you see these transforming day-to-day workflows in energy and commodity trading compared to sort of traditional rule-based automation?
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, so I see this really as being able to operate from a starting point with intelligence rather than having to step through several processes that may or may not be partially automated in order to get to that insightful and actionable intelligence. What the agentic automation promises and can deliver on is performing those steps and that analysis proactively with the human in the loop to progress appropriately through that workflow, but ultimately delivering the insight on quality data much, much quicker. So the experience for the business analyst who's leveraging this technology is they're starting from a point of being informed, which they can then take action on, rather than taking action to learn the information.
Right. And the AI agents that we've been interacting with, as Katie was talking about, they are alongside, they're pointing out and they're acting through the intelligence of understanding what the documents are, what the workflow process is, and bringing to the attention of where a person's attention needs to be drawn, what needs to be looked at. And so we're seeing a lot of kind of not just the rules base as you talked about, but seeing almost like somebody, an extra person on the team being able to help through the process and deliver and find the risks that are being or that are happening through the business process.
So, what are the most common risks trading companies face when processes are completely manual?
Broadly, the risk that, operational automation is looking to solve is synchronizing the physical activity to the financial position. And the risk that's introduced when there is time and discrepancies between those two, perspectives, what's happening physically in the real world and what's being financially represented, or how that physical position is being valued. When the processes are manual, it can take several days to identify a discrepancy or even hours. But if that can be reduced by an order of magnitude, then that's where, the risks can really be mitigated.
Right. And from my point of view, with my background, I always like to focus on what the fundamental things that trading companies need to get right as they go through their operations. And so things like your position being correct, your information in your system of records being correct. And if those things, like let's say a bill of lading date or an actual volume that for a particular movement is not correct in the system of record, then you run into exposing yourself to big risks. Things like having hedges wrong on your position, uh, keying off of certain dates that are incorrect that revolve around pricing or around delivery period. So, what my focus has always been is making sure those fundamentals of the commodities trading business are correct. And so the risks there are very simple, but they're very impactful across the organization. And so trying to find those risks as soon as possible helps alleviate a lot of the problems that happen inside of an organization.
So, drilling down from the sort of risky areas you mentioned, Katie, could you give us an example within the energy trading life cycle of an automation that really helped overcome, complexities and that directly also prevented I don't know, a costly error or a dispute, these sort of things?
Sure. Yeah, so in one of our intelligent applications, the operation intelligence application, we configure what we would call like a vessel operations agent. And what this agent is tasked to do is to monitor incoming information such as vessel ETAs, port notices, things that might impact that physical operation and compare it to the information in a system of record. So, for example, if there's event-based pricing, where the event date of the vessel might impact the pricing, this agent can monitor this incoming information, compare it to what might be reported and valued today in the position, and provide notices if there's a discrepancy and recommend next steps. So likewise with, say, looking at ETA notices and comparing demurrage estimates, comparing the ETA notice to a freight recap and estimating the exposure there, alerting the operations analysts of this information proactively, mitigates the risk of, potentially mishedging a pricing event, or even something like mismanaging your cost accruals associated with that vessel.
Jonathan, similarly on the sort of commodity trading side, specifically around perhaps inventory management or logistics, could you give us a practical example where automation really helps as well solve inaccuracy or prevent operational risk?
Sure. So, as Katie talked about, with the operational intelligence application that we have, there's a lot of risk mitigation around the actual movement of product. So, receiving bill of ladings, making sure the dates or the volumes are tied out with the system of record, exposing through agents, exposing particular risk factors that could come up between discrepancies of the actual data and the system of record. So I think she's done a good job covering that. The other one that I wanted to cover is another application that we have, which is the trade confirmation application, which is the beginning part of a trade life cycle. And where that comes into play is that as a company does a deal with another company, either directly with that company or through a broker, there's an exchange of confirmation paper or contracts. And part of our application, or what our application does for the trade confirmation, is that it reviews all of these factors that come on a confirmation document. That can be economic data such as what the pricing is, what the pricing dates are, what the delivery window is, what the volume is, who the counterparty is, things like that. And through our reconciliation agent process, we're able to compare the incoming document with the internal system of record and find those discrepancies that could potentially be there. So a big risk factor is you have to make sure that your data that you're entering for a trade into your system of record is correct. And if you don't have it correct to start, it can go down the chain. You can go through delivery, you can go through hedging, and you can get to the end with invoicing and not find this risk or not find this issue until it's too late. So part of the appeal for this application is to find and mitigate the risk up front. So by comparing these terms, having an agent review the documents, comparing it to your system of record, we're able to find these factors that could be at risk as soon as possible, as soon as, as close to the start of the trade life cycle. So that's another area where we're bringing in agents. There's risk mitigation as part of our intelligent applications.
That's brilliant. What types of processes lend themselves best to automation in trading from what you see around you?
Yeah, so I think because we are really focused on automating operational information, there's a lot of processes today that are quite manual, and not efficient. So, this is definitely really ripe for automation, and some of the, agents and tools that we've just discussed can help, either replace or augment some of these manual processes. I think generally speaking, where you have very, very large volumes of data as well, the automation that's the technology that's available can, process in a way that, humans simply can't. And so this is really can be impactful as well.
Jonathan, you wanted to add
Sure.
something?
So throughout my career, what I have noticed is that usually when you're in doing a trade, when you're doing operations, you are constantly inundated with information. So it can be bill of lading documents if you're moving trucks that could come every single day, multiple trucks movements per day if you have rail car movements, and that's a lot of what our customers have. Um, there's so much manual tasks that are done of getting the information outside of the system into the system. And we see this over and over at every prospect and every customer that we have is this overwhelming amount of information that comes into an operation. And how do I interact with this data? What data is most important to mitigate risk? What data needs to go in and what time scale? And it becomes a huge burden for organizations to have to deal with all this information. And so as we move through the process and as we've seen with our customers, focusing on these areas that have repetitive, large amounts of data that need to be interacted with. So bill of lading documents, inspection reports, inventory reports, confirmation documents. These are all the information that gets sent to an organization, and they have to determine what to do with it, what to reconcile, what to focus on. And so part of what ClearDox is doing with our intelligent applications is putting a workflow around these different processes and helping our customers mitigate the risk for each one of these processes. So interacting with the data, determining what's important, going through that workflow for the user, interacting with the system of records. And so that whole process is we're trying to bring into that risk mitigation part of an organization.
How do you ensure that automation tools remain adaptable to fast-changing market conditions?
Yeah, I mean, so what we do today is, like Jonathan mentioned, our intelligent application strategy like a modular approach, right? So rather than considering a monolithic application, there's a certain amount of adaptability that can easily be achieved across the intelligent applications. So there's a framework that's reusable for a variety of use cases and can be customized for a variety of use cases while still servicing the fundamentals of risk management and operational automation across several documents and several business processes, yet they can be uniquely customized enough to the business process. So as that business process changes, or the demand may arise for a new type of app, maybe a new regulation is driving sort of a new requirement, those can be really quickly deployed. So sort of keeping that modular approach allows the balance of individual business domain specific application use while still being flexible enough to expand and reuse certain components of that. So I think, trying to find that right balance is the challenge always, but that's something that, we do today is make sure we have this like modular application-based approach. It's really focused on user-centric business domain problems.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to add to Katie's points is that we also, uh, being somebody who's developing these applications, we're also the ones that are bringing the best technology that's part of that application as well. So the large language models that power our applications, the AI agents that power our applications, that's all something that we evaluate on a daily basis. And as the landscape of the technology is changing so rapidly, that's something that our customers don't have to worry about. They don't have to worry if they're on the latest large language model. They don't have to worry about if they have the best AI agent. That's something that we at ClearDox take over as part of our processes. We are constantly evaluating these technology partners we have and constantly bringing our customers the best technology that is out available in the market today.
You work with both energy and commodity trading companies. Do you see fundamental differences between the energy and commodity trading sectors in that regard?
Yeah, I'll answer that. Honestly, we see more similarities than differences between the two in terms of a lot of the business processes that we've discussed, confirming business, physically scheduling the operations, settlement, financing. There's a lot of similarities. I think the differences we see are more around how the businesses respond to risk, or rather maybe what drives that. So maybe in commodities, it could be more seasonal. And so, they need that sort of elastic way to handle changing in demand and changing in data volume. Maybe in the energies, more responsive to like sort of compliance decisions or that sort of environment. Although I feel that there's way more similarities than differences.
Yeah, and I think the other thing here is what we're trying to do with ClearDox is help solve fundamental problems. And these fundamental problems are something we see at every customer, regardless of the commodity they trade, regardless of the market they're in, if it's in the US or Europe or Asia. The fundamental issues that these companies face are relatively similar. Um, is our data correct in our system of record? Have we reconciled this data, this group of data against this group of data? Have we found or are we asking the right questions of where do we need to focus our attention? So these are all fundamental problems that exist in market today. And as Katie said, we're not seeing a whole lot of differences and a lot more similarities because these fundamental problems are what everybody has to tackle and everyone has to solve for. So agreeing with Katie that it's more similar than it is different.
Right. And speaking of data, what role does data quality play in the success of automation software?
Yeah, I mean, data quality is really foundational. Access to data, access to timely data is really what powers all automation solutions. And one of the bigger challenges that our customers face isn't necessarily data quality, but rather data normalization. And I think that's really something that the commodity and energy industry has always had to grapple with, is how different reference data is managed from company to company. And so in order for us to provide the intelligent applications that we do, data normalization is a really important step. We were able to deploy an intelligent normalization agent this year that is able to proactively monitor incoming data with an understanding of reference data, or even, to the extent that's available, industry normalized data, and proactively find these differences from source to target, suggest mappings, and even produce and create mappings. So what it was otherwise a more manual, less automated process can be completely streamlined with a tuned agent to that process.
And I mean, I don't have a lot to add to what Katie said, but I think data is crucial for any organization. System of record data, data that's incoming from third parties. What we are seeing though is a demand from our customers for better quality data. So if you're working with a third party vendor, more conversations are being had of, do you have API connections? Can we get this data in a better way? And companies and customers are not as afraid to ask those questions to vendors because it's more expected in the industry now. And so what that does for us is that it leads us to be even more efficient and to be able to build these solutions better because the industry as a whole has adapted better data practices, which really is a great thing for the industry and also a great thing for ClearDox.
When it comes to agentic automation, what safeguards and governance models are needed to ensure it delivers value in trading environment, but without introducing new risks around compliance or transparency or control?
Yeah, so every company will have its own sort of governance policy around that. And to a certain extent, I would say introducing agentic automation shouldn't be evaluated in any way different than you may evaluate any technology you're going to introduce. So while it enables delivering solutions, how it does it and what it does should always be evaluated really through the same lens. But there are specific things you need to understand about, large language models, who's hosting your large language models, what version they're on, et cetera, that, we manage with our data science team, but choosing vendors and hosting solutions that align to your existing policies is, something to really be aware of. And that information is available. So if you're looking at models, or you maybe already hosting your solutions on the Google Cloud platform, then the models that are hosted there, you're not introducing new risk. The same policies would apply. And then when it comes down to the application and the business use, it's really making sure that, I think this is something Jonathan said earlier, making sure you have a real business problem you're trying to solve. And not deploying AI or any automation technology, just for the sake of it, but really with a clear value proposition where you can assess if you are introducing new risks in some way, you understand that the value proposition is there, the risk reward is there, but fundamentally, you're going to assess it in the same way you would any other technology.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a two-pronged approach for our customers and for people in the industry. You have to evaluate the technology and understand what technology is being used, what models are being used, what the data security is around those models. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, like Katie said, is understanding what the business outcome is, the business process, what your expected outcome is, and evaluating it based on that. The technology is very new, but it is very powerful, and it's something that each company should understand what the outcome they're looking for is when they evaluate AI agents.
So many companies struggle with whether to build their own solutions or buy existing ones. What factors should guide that decision, in your opinion?
Yeah, so what we hear from our customers is what they do is evaluate whether the solution that they're considering the build or buy for is commercial for them or proprietary for their own business versus whether it is something that they would not really own or be commercial for themselves. And that, I think, is an inflection point to take you on one path or another. And so really understanding your own business strategic and commercial objectives helps, I think, guide that decision.
Yeah, and I think also you have to look at each company has to evaluate themselves internally. What is it we're trying to do? What is the process we're trying to achieve? And really understanding what's feasible. I think we see a lot of companies in different sizes, smaller companies, larger companies. And the questions really need to be asked internally first is, okay, if we are going to tackle this internally, what is involved? Who is involved? Do we have the right resources in place? The other big factor for the build versus buy conversation is technology upkeep, right? So models are constantly changing. Technology is constantly changing. You need to have resources in place to be able to adapt to the new technology as it changes, which is something that ClearDox does as part of our assessment and our building of our own intelligent application. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but starting internally, understanding business process, understanding what resources we have, and the technology upkeep, I think are the three main things that everybody should be evaluating internally.
And from your experience, what are the sort of hidden costs of building in-house?
Yeah, I would say Jonathan covered this right now. I think there's several, but one of the biggest ones is maintenance. So
Hmm.
understanding what it may be cost to build and the type of team you need to put in place to build a solution, and then maybe not fully anticipating what is the cost of maintenance for that product once it's delivered and you have users in your organization relying on it. How do you maintain it? How do you keep it enriched and enhanced as new technologies change or your users demand new features? That's that's something that is really an important part of the analysis and maybe slightly hidden a little bit in the initial phase of considering buy versus build. Until you do it, you don't necessarily know what the maintenance costs and structure might be.
And
Yeah.
in both cases, how can companies ensure their solutions are auditable and explainable? Because this is nowadays a major concern.
Yeah, I think in both cases, you need to evaluate the technology, the user interface, how data is stored, what data is stored, making sure, almost defining what that endpoint is. So at the end of the day, a year from now, I may do a trade, but I am going to be audited on it. And when I'm audited on it, what information will the auditor ask for? And almost starting from a bottom up approach or top down approach to say, determine, is that data going to be stored? Is it going to be accessible to me on demand, or do I need to manage a data archive solution? And, how often do I purge data or archive, and how can I recall it when I need to recall it? It can get very sophisticated and very complicated. So great question to ask vendors that you're considering, especially if you know that's going to be one of the requirements of both the user actions in your system and the data that passes through it. Both should be auditable.
Right. And it's something that as you're evaluating technology, you need to be asking the question of what are the data retention policies? How do I recall data from the system? What data is available for me to integrate to? We have so many customers now that have their own data storage platforms like data lakes or data warehouses. And so many of our customers want to integrate ClearDox into those platforms so that they can retain their data and retain the auditability of the data. And so it's something that is, again, crucial to the evaluation of certain applications or certain software vendors. It's become more and more relevant as time has gone on.
Looking at a little bit into the future now, how do you see automation transforming the role of human traders and risk managers as well, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I'm very like optimistic and excited about how this transformation is going to happen, because kind of to circle back to the first question you asked, is I've really seen the impact that it can have on your work experience. So I think as technology gets more adopted, then you go from more task oriented to strategic enablement, and you can seamlessly share knowledge in your organization. You can mitigate attrition, and the knowledge gap that leaves when somebody leaves your company. You can start to mitigate against that, and really provide an infrastructure that promotes scale in an organization, and for the employees of the organization to act on more, strategic initiatives.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think, agents, large language models, the interaction with these processes and this technology is going to be absolutely a part of everybody's work life in the future. And what I always say as I talk on these webinars or talk to different groups is I always say that companies who are investing or companies who are interested in this technology now will become the winners in the future. And companies who are not taking this seriously or ignoring this technology will not reap the benefits. And we've already seen in our industry the people who are adopting technology, the people who are embracing this type of technology, we see that they're finding real world value. The fundamentals have changed, the risk approach has changed, and the strategy has changed for these companies. And so my message to answer the question is everybody needs to be at least evaluating this technology, understanding what it's capable of, and being prepared that this is going to be the way of the future.
Okay, well, I guess you sort of answered my my next question, which was, but we have yet to hear Katie on that. But what advice would you give, companies just starting their automation journey?
Yeah, I would say start small, and I would say start with a bona fide pain point, and then determine if AI is a good solution provider for this particular pain point. But I think you have to be driven from a place of wanting to solve a problem and having a real problem to solve. And it can be small to start with. It gives you the opportunity to learn about the technology, as Jonathan mentioned, learn about what are the safe ways for your organization to adopt it and scale into it. And I think with everything we do, there's always an opportunity to iterate and move through. So, don't start with an enormous project that's going to disrupt your organization. That's not necessary. You can learn so much and really educate yourself and be, a leader in your organization by learning from a small yet very tactically and important project.
Anything to add, Jonathan, to
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I think my previous answer to the other question kind of summarized it. But people who are investing in this, and if you're listening to this and you're on the operations side, you should absolutely be asking your IT team, what are we doing? Is the evaluation process happening? And if you're on the IT side, you need to be asking your business leaders, what is your biggest pain point? Where's places that we can come in and help? And so having that conversation between those two groups is absolutely fundamental right now in the industry because the people that are having those conversations are coming up with solutions, coming up with better business processes, and are ultimately going to benefit from it in the future.
Brilliant. If you had to summarize the biggest opportunity automation brings to energy and commodity trading in one sentence, what would it be?
Okay, so one sentence, that's a challenge, but I would say the opportunity that I see is scaling safely, safer. So being able to scale with true mitigation, risk mitigation you can rely on, I think is the opportunity that should be realized with this type of automation.
It's a good sentence. Jonathan?
Let's see. I think my one sentence to summarize would be, um, this technology is allowing companies in the industry, trading companies in the industry, to help solve their fundamental risk operations or operational risk problems. I think I think that's solving operational risk problems probably be what I would say is probably to summarize what we've talked about is that's what it's doing. Yeah.
That's very impactful. Well, thanks, Katie, Jonathan, for a really fascinating conversation. And thanks to our listeners as well for joining. Until next time, wishing you all the best and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie.